In the land down under, by the 1930s, Australian politics was divided between three parties. The Labour Party, spelled the American way without the useless U, the oddly named Liberal Party, which is actually more conservative, and the Australian Country Party, which is rural and works with the Liberals. By the 1930s, Japan was trying to conquer the ocean. Coalition Prime Minister Joseph Lyons was able to handle the Great Depression, but not the Japan, so he died during his retirement negotiations. So the Country Party took over for a couple days until the Liberals found a new guy named Robert Menzies, which was a hassle to the country guy Earl Page because Menzies was a World War I Dodger, so they just replaced him with a dude named Arthur Faden. But meanwhile, Labour was discussing how left should they be, so Menzies was able to get the election just in time because
it's time for World War II.
So now Japan is trying even harder to conquer the ocean. Menzies traveled to Egypt to meet the troops, then to Britain to negotiate how they can help. Then Winston Churchill basically told them, "You're on your own, pal." The UK was basically abandoning the Pacific to bring everyone back to India or the English Channel. Meanwhile, in America, three progressives ran their heads together and a dude named Alf became president. He wanted to join the war, but was hesitant to actually go through with it. Menzies was taking so long with negotiations with the UK, the party literally just removed him from power, so Arthur Faden became prime minister. Japan was expanding as far west with their Thai allies to Calcutta, leading to one of the bloodiest fights in the World War. And they were able to take over the Australian territory of Papua New Guinea, so now the mainland was next. Which was a hassle to Australia because the majority of their army is now in Egypt because of the UK. Japan invaded into Darwin and northern Queensland. But luckily, New Zealand came to the rescue, and one of their ministers, Bob Semple, created his own tank, which was less of a tank and actually a tractor with a bunch of garbage welded to it and a bunch of dudes holding guns inside. Australians weren't super impressed, but they'll take what they got, and with some motivation. Late February, in Tumula, north of Townsville, Queensland. The Japanese came from the north. They were pinned against the beach, and suddenly the Semple tanks rolled out. Against the Japanese human wave charge, it was actually doing kinda well. Even though they didn't even have radios, they had to communicate with the tanks via flag. Future Prime Minister Harold Holt served on the ground, and future Prime Minister John Gorton served in one of the tanks. The Japanese only had a couple lunge mines with them. Then they brought in their, actual tanks to Ha-Go. So now the Japanese had a severe advantage, sometimes literally driving through the Semples. But suddenly, Australian reinforcements arrived. In Sentinel tanks, actual tanks. And they were literally pissing lead onto the Japanese, sending them into retreat. Even suffering a naval invasion is no time to delay the election, so John Curtin of the Labour was elected, essentially bringing the New Deal to Australia. Eventually, the Australians were able to push the Japanese out of Queensland and headed to Darwin, but they didn't get there before the end of the war. Because around the same time, in 1943, Japan launched a Punic victory over Midway Atoll, winning the naval battle but failing to secure the island, which eventually led the US to join World War II. And much like Roosevelt, John Curtin ended up dying around the end of the war. Afterwards, Australia negotiated with the UK to get a bunch of its island territories, including Fiji, who was originally supposed to join Australia way back. But New Zealand was still disinterested in actually joining Australia. Their native policy is just that bad.
You know, we saved your ass in World War II.
Yeah, well, we saved your ass.
Of our economy.
That's true.
East Timor wanted to join Australia and actually voted to, but Indonesia just invaded them and occupied them until the 90s. The UK also, to try and keep Australia closer to it, decided to appoint its own unique monarchy, being the brother of the two previous kings, Henry, Duke of Gloucester, now Prince Henry I of Australia. Meanwhile, Archie Cameron took back control of the Country Party, now renamed the National Party, and much like that time in Victoria, decided to actually coalition with Labour. But not the same Labour, Lang Labour. Jack Lang split with the Labour Party again, now with a bunch of disfranchised Catholic voters formed the Democratic Party. They liked a lot of Curtin's ideas, but they were also very staunchly anti-communist, which was pretty relevant for the new Cold War. So Jack Lang became Prime Minister from 1949 till his retirement in 1966. overseeing reconstruction, the highway system, development of the islands, most notably in the North Solomons because they found one of the largest copper mines in the world. And again, Jack was very anti-communist, and so Australia ended up joining the US in the Greek Civil War, the Madagascar Uprising, the Korean War, and the war in Bolivia. After some encouragement. After Jack Lang's retirement, Arthur Caldwell really wasn't that charismatic of a new leader for the Dems. Harold Holt came next, and he was the first prime minister actually born after Australia was formed. He actually came from the liberal wing of the Liberal Party, so he tried washing away a lot of the white Australian policy, establishing the Australian dollar-e-do, and tried moving relations closer to the US from the UK. He also oversaw the entrance into the Vietnam War, which the public needed a lot of encouragement for that. Caldwell actually campaigned against the Vietnam War, campaigning with protesters. Then during campaigning in Sydney, he was getting driven around by party members. Someone came up to his window and shot him in the face. He was quickly arrested. Harold Holt was seen as kind of a humble guy. The Liberals did so well they didn't even need the Nationals coalitioning, for the first and only time. But he also had to deal with stagflation, an unpopular war, some military blunders, the news reporting about all this. So he decided to go on a holiday. He's a real big swimmer. Him and some friends decided to head out, but most of them, other than a guy named Alan Stewart, didn't join him. And then Harold Holt saw that the waves were getting kind of big, so he decided to stay back. But Alan swam out, and suddenly he got washed away. Harold ran back and reported this to the Coast Guard. Now, Alan's body was never recovered, and it became a huge mystery of what happened. At the time, a big conspiracy theory was Alan and Harold Holt were actually gay lovers, which turned into a spat, and Alan was murdered by Harold. These rumors and everything that was going on got to Harold, so he decided to retire from public life, and he continued to deny these rumors till his death in 1999. John Gordon came next, and he did win the election, bringing back the standard Liberal National Coalition. Despite being a guy who served in one of the Semple tanks and fought during the Battle of Australia, even fighting a Japanese officer with a bayonet against a katana, in which he kept the katana after, he was seen as kind of a boring dude. But he did spend a lot on the independent Australian film industry. He continued working with the US in Vietnam, which was deeply unpopular. The Democrats were doing well again, and John Gordon got a motion of no confidence against him, which he literally won with just his own vote. The next year, Gough Whitlam was elected, off the back of remixing Jack Lang's campaign slogan, "It's Time," in one of the most successful and popular campaign songs ever. He ended the draft, pardoned Dodgers, and did a lot of things that most people today would call woke, like free college, ending the death penalty, establishing Medicare for all, allowing women to have rights, allowing Papua New Guinea rights to even have its own independence, except for the Solomon Islands, because, that mine is still really good. Even giving basic human rights to the Aboriginals, and giving them land back, opening up trade with China. But many people thought this was going far, leading to stiff competition from William McMahon, father of Julian McMahon, and Democrat Billy Mackey Sheldon. But it just seemed to be Gough's time because no matter what, he was invincible. Until, of course, the 70s oil embargoes. Now the government ain't got no money. Then a dude literally named Rex tried asking for money without getting anyone's permission to do it first, and that was a huge scandal. So Malcolm Fraser decided to just lock down the government with support from the Dems and Country Club. With the government equally divided, nothing got done. Until the Dems felt like this was taking way too long, and the prince said, "Stop this," calling an early election. And I guess because of the oil embargo, Fraser actually ended up winning in 1975. I guess if you really want to make comparisons, Gough is kind of like Elliot Trudeau, and Fraser's kind of like Joe Clark. He's not like the worst person ever. He did cut money for the arts, but kept Medicare and even established the Council of Multicultural Affairs and even boycotted South Africa. But unlike his previous liberal leaders, he wanted a firm grip on the party discipline, which a lot of people called crazy. He was also selling wool to the USSR despite the whole Cold War thing. His deputy didn't pay any taxes. The Solomon Islands went into a civil war. Fiji's government was couped. One of his ministers, Don Chip, defected to become a Dem. Mad Max was released to be a parody of this time in Australia. Prince Henry died in 1974 at the age of 74, being the last of the members of the Order of St. Patrick, and being the last surviving son of George V. His eldest son, William, died in 72 during a plane crash that he was piloting for a race, so succeeded him was his second son, Richard. Gough returned to office in 1977. He ended the war in the Solomons, giving them a referendum to leave or not, which they voted yes, but even till 2025, they'll just keep kicking that can down the road. He also paid for a lot of cheap public housing. For the 1980 election, he finally decided to retire from public politics. Bill Hayden then lost the election to Don Chip, bringing the Democrats back into government since Jack Lang. With help of the Nationals, they started building a dam in South Tasmania, but a lot of environmentalists hated that and protested, so Labour decided to swoop in on that with a dude named Bob Hawke, winning the 83 election, and those protesters will eventually become the Green Party. Hawke was seen as the perfect replacement for Gough. He balanced the factions of the Labour Party without giving too much preference to one. He's in the Guinness World Records for drinking 2.5 pints in 11 seconds. Seriously. He interacted with the public regularly and even appeared on TV quite often. He made Waltzing Matilda finally the national anthem officially, abolishing the gold standard, establishing a new social card, was there to witness Kiss become like the biggest thing in Australia since sliced bread, as well as the start of America's love of the land down under. In 1988, he met with Queen Elizabeth, Prince Richard, and even Prime Minister of the UK, Neil Kinnock, because Australia was finally ready to move out of their parents' house and become a republic. Don't worry, Prince Richard continued to find stuff to do. With the Nationals in Queensland basically going crazy, the Liberals splitting on if they support the monarchy or not, with the leaders of the monarchists actually being an Aboriginal named Boner, much of the Republican side of the party moved to the Democrats. Janie Haines became the first female frontrunner to a major political party, while Hawke still became the first elected president of Australia. Around the same time, Steve Irwin became Australia's national treasure. Anyone else remember his daughter Bindi on Discovery Kids? 93 saw the election of centrist Malcolm Turnbull. He was an independent who really campaigned hard for the Republic movement, working with the former Minister of the Treasury and Secretary of Treasury Paul Keating. The early to mid-90s was a real nation-building era of bipartisan co-effort for Australia. In 1996, the Port Arthur shooting led to Australia having a massive buyback program where the government bought and destroyed guns, becoming one of the safest nations on Earth. But despite this, a lot of conservatives hated that, as well as the economy was pretty shaky at first, starting all over again. And it turned out Paul Keating had an oddly close relationship with the dictator of Indonesia. Meanwhile, the Liberal and the Democrat Party fused into Liberal Dems, not to be confused with the ones in the UK, and in 1998 Alexander Downer was elected President of Australia, with Janine becoming the first female Vice President, until her death in 2004. The regime also saw the Native Titles Amendment Act that kind of made both native and settler names co-legal. East Timor was finally allowed independence thanks to the UN, and the US negotiated that a lot of the surrounding Catholic islands were also given to Timor. They didn't really have a whole lot to do with each other, but that's America for you. Also, oil was found.
It's kind of awkward because it was like, all right, we found a ton of oil. Let's start drilling.
But it's closer to me, though.
Oh, well, hey, East Timor, didn't quite see you there.
I'm kind of in a bit of a struggle.
Maybe we could share it?
Great, I'm on it. Let's go.
And Australia took most. By this time, Pauline Hanson founded the Scumbag Party, the One Nation Party, campaigning against immigrants. At the same time, immigrants were sneaking onto Australia through boats that were then dropped off on Christmas Island, which, yes, is real. This was oddly popular with the public. Then, of course, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which Australia was still selling wheat to Iraq despite being at war with them. Downa was defeated by a Welsh-born Julia Gillard, becoming the first female president of Australia. Her vice president was the former lead singer to the band Midnight Oil, environmentalist Peter Garrett, who promised to pull out of the Middle East by Christmas, and Australia sort of did. They sent some disaster aid to Indonesia, modernized the internet and economy, apologized to the natives. The housing market exploded, but Julia worked very quickly, giving people stimulus, taxing the mines, investing in green energy, making sure houses have insulation, and give a carbon tax, making sure that Australia was one of the only countries that weren't super hit by the recession, even if a couple houses did burn down. But of course, Rome wasn't built in one day, and people hate waiting. So the Lib Dems win the House, leading to a minority government, with a lot of people saying that environmental taxes aren't getting enough money, and the right, of course, playing the unmarried Catwoman card against the woman, which was supported by the Lib Dems leader Tony Abbott.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. Because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives. He needs a mirror. That's what he needs.
But then Gillard also oversaw that migrants were still being sent to island facilities, which was seen as very hypocritical of her government. So she ended up resigning to a dude named Kim for 80 days before the election, and Tony came, kind of being a US Republican spin to Australia, off the back of Clive Palmer's money. He's kind of like Australian Steve Bannon. He is a mining mogul who, of course, helped repeal the carbon tax. The Abbott administration oversaw people in boats literally heading out to different boats attacking migrants, cuts in education and healthcare, and Tony even tried to reestablish ties to the monarchy and knighthoods for some reason, which was deeply unpopular. So in February 2015, he was deposed. For the Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, till it was revealed she used taxpayer money to take helicopter flights, so she resigned September 15th. Malcolm Turnbull considered rerunning, but eventually turned it down. Paulina merged One Nation with the Lib Dems, and she even tried running, so the establishment, Bill Shorten, was assumed in office instead. And he won by 1 seat in 2016, so of course he got a no confidence vote immediately, basically. 2017, Scott Morrison took over, and he's known as the guy who used to run Australia's tourism board, creating this commercial.
So where the bloody hell are you?
He also said a lot of silly things.
This is coal. Don't be afraid.
The
Don't be scared.
the treasurer knows the rule on crops.
I clear up one thing.
Not the
with you
Macca's
guys
thing. The Macca's
from
thing?
ages ago.
The Macca's thing, right, yeah.
It is the biggest urban myth ever.
So it's not even true.
That you pooed your pants at the Engadine McDonald's?
It's complete and utter rubbish. I found the whole thing incredibly amusing. And we've always joked about it.
And because of that coal he really loved so much, this led to some of the worst wildfires in Australian history. Meanwhile, he was on holiday in Hawaii away from it all. As well as accidentally tackling a child during a soccer game, the Lib Dems decided to quietly kick him out of the party. He was replaced by anti-vax Craig Kelly, with Palmer at the absolute worst time in 2019, so he lost pretty significantly to Anthony Albanese's labor. He oversaw the expansion of green energies, the legalization of gay marriage, Bluey becoming a world phenomenon, a bill making it illegal for bosses to call you after work hours about work, and he tried passing the Indigenous Voice Code design program, which was trying to make an advisory board of Indigenous people to make the country work better for them, but it was cancelled by the Lib Dems. The 2022 election saw the Teal Independence group of vaguely working together people who are very pro-environment, trying to push moderates to actually do something or they'll vote them out by themselves. Of course, Rome wasn't built in one day and people hate waiting, so Albanese was trying his best, but a lot of people thought he was either doing too much or not doing too enough. Sort of comparing him to Joe Biden, with his Trump being Peter Dutton, who was a former One Nation leader, now the leader of the Lib Dems, who campaigned hard on culture war stuff and was directly responsible for the canceling of Indigenous voice. But then real Trump came to power, and people realized that no one wants this around the world, so Peter lost pretty hard. So as of this video, Albanese remains in power. In Australia's future is looking pretty decent. You should go to the land down under and hit that like button and subscribe button. You'll plunder and glow or something.